Welcome to Persons of Interest. I am your host, Derek Dockett. The guest in this episode spends a lot of time at sporting events, but not in the way that you might imagine. Pam Chvotkin works behind the scenes of various events in broadcast and television production roles. She's seen a lot and experienced a lot, but she's also sharing her knowledge and experiences with students as an adjunct professor at the University of Alabama. Her Twitter account is one of my favorites because she shares her experiences on the job and also has a little fun while traveling. Here's Pam Chvotkin on Persons of Interest. For this episode, I am very pleased to be talking to one of my earliest Twitter friends, going all the way back to the sports PR chat. That's been like, what do you think, Pam? Oh, gosh, 2010, 11?
Oh, at least. And I like how you're introducing me as your internet friend, because that makes me sound so cool. Let me tell you.
Well, and the true story is, and I was going to bring this up too. So my wife and I made a trip to Washington, D.C. Oh, gosh, that may have been 2012-ish. And we had every intention of meeting up for lunch or something like that and just couldn't make it work. But that's, of course, where you live. And by the way, before I go any further, Pam Chvotkin. I've said that right, correct?
Yeah, you did. That was great.
Yeah, I've been around the block. I know my way around the internet. Follow her on Twitter. Her handle is one of the funniest and one that I most appreciate so much. Reddus Foximus. That's at REDDUSFOXIMUS. Just type in her name if you need to. But Reddus Foximus is her Twitter handle, and I love it. She lives in the DC area. But yeah, we first connected through Sports PR Chat, which was for folks wanting to be in the sports PR communications world. I was working at the Missouri Valley Conference at the time, doing social media, digital media. And you've been in the sports PR, behind the scenes, production, all that for a long time. And now you're even teaching a class, which I think is interesting. We'll get into that too. But that's how we first connected. And it just we've always just sort of stayed in touch there and bounced stuff off of Twitter. And of course, you've got like one of the funniest and one of the Twitter feeds that I most appreciate because you always do the dating tweets too.
Again, still not giving me a vote of confidence as being cool, but No,
because it's entertaining. Can you tell people what that is when you sometimes find yourself out with friends or, just trying to get dinner somewhere and you may interact with, or I shouldn't say interact, you may encounter two people on a blind date or a first date and take it from there. I'll let you take it from there.
So to just break it down, I don't like to be invasive and I don't like to try to spy on anybody. I don't go out to restaurants or out with friends looking for this. They find me.
Yeah, it just happens.
It just happens. And I it's the most organic thing. And I really try not to invade anyone's privacy. I don't stalk them.
And you're not putting them out by name. You don't know the people.
I have no idea who they are. Yeah. And it's often when I'm by myself, which happens quite a bit on the road. Or if I'm just waiting for somebody and I'll just notice something out of the corner of my eye. But I'm not somebody, if I'm out by myself, and I was just discussing this with a friend. I did this solo trip to the UK this past summer, and I'm just not somebody that's going to sit at a table at a restaurant, 5 million feet away from everybody. I want to be social, or at least sit at the bar where I'm not isolating myself. And you would be surprised at what people will do in public. And it's just something that's very raw and I would assume natural, but it's very obvious when people are on a first date or in a meeting or interview or what have you in public, because the interactions are awkward and they're very noticeable. And you can obviously tell when people have been together a long time, or they're friendly and they're comfortable with each other. When you see somebody on a first date or a second date, it's the most uncomfortably amazing thing you've seen. And I feel that it's my public duty to share that with the world.
It's almost a study of psychology.
It really is the study of psychology, because there's so many things that are telltale signs of when you're interested in somebody, and it's just by the body language or the way that they act or how they're interacting. And I've been fortunate enough, maybe not fortunate for them, but if I'm sitting at a corner of the bar, sometimes they're sitting perpendicular to me or right next to me or close enough to me that if I'm just sitting there, they don't even know I'm there, because they're so consumed with one another that they have no idea what's going on. And, again, I try to be subtle about if I'm going to take pictures, which really doesn't happen that often, but I feel pictures are important for context. So I'll do kind of a play-by-play of a live date sometimes. And I will talk about, okay, their legs are crossed toward each other and he's playing with his hair a lot, or she's playing with her hair a lot. They're showing each other pictures. He reached for the check and she didn't even, there's just so many different types of things that you can watch, and it's fascinating to see how certain people interact with one another. So, and
you're not, for the listening audience, you're not in their face. You're literally like,
no. I am so far removed. Yeah. Again, they wouldn't even know that I'm right. there, and I don't go up to them and say, "Hey, what's your deal?"
Right. You're just observing two people from afar.
Exactly, observing people from afar. Because in my mindset, and I feel like this is what happens when we go out. We love to people watch. We like to see certain things, and I feel like live dates are often train wrecks until otherwise noted. So you want to root for a couple that's out on a first date, right? Like you want them to, you want good things to happen, and you want it to be cute and sweet, and you want everybody to love, but sometimes that doesn't always happen. So.
Well, and it's not that you do it every single time. It might pop up like once a month. Like it's not
if that. And I'll get really lucky if it happens more than once. But sometimes I'm on a work trip for 2 weeks, and if I'm out by myself, I'll notice things more than I will if I'm out with a bunch of people. So. And then sometimes my friends will get into it too, be like, "Oh, is that a date? Oh, is that a date?" And then they'll try to, do a play-by-play, but I've only gone up to somebody once after a really terrible date where she looked, visibly distraught, kind of just to say, "Hey, you're better than that." And I saw that from across the room. And then this actually was the first time that I started tweeting about it, and she ended up following me on Twitter, and we became friends. And she's like, "This is the most hilarious thing I've ever seen," and you were spot on with it. So
there you go.
I felt the need to continue after that. So that's basically the skinny of it.
There you go. And that's what it's all about.
Exactly.
Well, I didn't think we'd get into that first, but I had to let people know that's like one thing that I always appreciate about your Twitter feed. But one thing that we both sort of have a little affinity towards is the production life. And even though I'm not in it anymore, you are heavily involved doing stuff, ESPN, have you done CBS stuff too? You've done All-Star Games.
In fact, I've done more CBS stuff this
World
season
Series,
than I had anything else.
Okay. You've done World Series. What is the most significant event, in your opinion, one that stands out that you've done? I know you've been like World Series. Have you done an NBA Finals? Have you done a Stanley Cup?
I've done Stanley Cup. I've done all four of the major sporting events in the U.S.
Super Bowl? Sorry? Super Bowl too?
I've done Super Bowl, yep. Wow. And I'll be doing Super Bowl again this year with CBS as well.
So which one, game-wise, stands out the most to you?
I feel like each network and each event they're so different. It's such a hard thing to describe. I get asked this a lot. I feel like anything that's got potential 7 games is more enjoyable for me, just because
it's not a one and done.
It's not a one and done. Again, each and to be clear, I'm a full-time independent contractor, so I'm a full-time freelancer, and I work pretty much for almost every network in every sport. So being in the DC area, being fortunate enough to deal with college and high school events and professional events, and I kind of get a wide range of what is more enjoyable to me. But World Series is up there. Any of those international events are pretty special just because of the audience that you're geared towards and who you're providing the production for, in other words. So, and I've worked with MLB Network on the international side, which is really cool because they essentially broadcast very similar to what Fox does, only they do the broadcast is for everybody else but the United States. So I kind of feel more of a sense of pride for people that are overseas that want that connection to home rather than, and this is no offense to Fox at all, but rather than the guy sitting on the couch, having no interest in either team, just watching it to watch, there's more of a vested interest for me. So I feel, working a little bit harder is providing that positive experience that people want to watch in a different country watching, what a sport that they love. So that's up there. There's definitely been some pretty memorable games with the World Series in the last few years. It's been awesome. Stanley Cup final is great. I'm a Caps fan, so last year was pretty spectacular. Yeah. NCAA tournament Final Four is awesome. It had been on my bucket list for a really long time, and I'm going into my fourth this coming year. So getting to do that was pretty cool. And it's just checking stuff off my list. I mean, there's no ceiling. I always want to keep building. So, the sky's the limit. I feel like Olympics is up there. World Cup is up there. I've done international soccer with Copa America. So that was really cool. There's so many that I can list that there's no one top favorite because I feel like games are more exciting than the actual full-on tournament for me.
So I didn't set this up very well, but we call it #ProductionLife. But so from my standpoint, when I was working at the Missouri Valley Conference, I had a little taste of it because we always would be there. And at the conference level, there are certain games, live televised events that the conference office at the Valley was responsible for. These were either be ESPN3, the regional cable, or in sometimes we would work hand in hand with ESPN, ESPN2, ESPNU, and we would, have a say in the broadcasters or a say in the production crew, meaning official stats, talent stats. A lot of folks don't know any of these terms that I just mentioned. What is your role behind the scenes when you are working production for live sporting events?
So my role varies depending upon what network I'm with. It can range from stage manager, which is also known as a booth coordinator. I can be a broadcast associate or a production assistant, or production coordinator or production manager. It just kind of depends. But all in all, it's the job description is pretty undefined. Yeah. And it's extremely varied, and it ranges from doing managerial tasks to being an office manager to dealing with things like human resources to accountant. Essentially, I'm assisting the lead production manager or remote ops, is like we like to call it, production manager, to help coordinate the crew on site. So there's a difference between studio operations and remote operations. And I'm strictly remote. I am not in a studio. I do not go into, an office where everything is stationary. We're basically building a studio from scratch, whether it's a table or set or what have you, but everything is completely built on site, and there's basically no room for error when you're dealing with live television, as you know.
Yes.
And we just don't. We have storylines that we want to follow for how directors and producers want to see happen, and we have statistics to go off of, but we really don't know how certain games are going to go. And so we try to find as much research as we can to set us up correctly to help broadcast the game with the content that we have. But at the end of the day, we're watching it with everybody else. So we're kind of trying to just steer the story as best as we can. I mean, I always just like to tell people that we're storytellers, and we've got, a mindset to say, okay, this is how we think it's going to go. And, traditionally or historically, this is how the game's gone in the past. There's never been a 16 seed that's beaten a 1 seed. So surely this is never going to happen. And then we see something like UNBC last year that is just, a mind-blowing thing. And
awesomely mind-blowing.
Awesomely mind-blowing thing. I mean, even when they're up 20 points with, 10 minutes to go, you're like, this is happening, right? This is still happening. And everyone is just kind of in awe that it's breaking all these records, but it's a fascinating thing to be a part of. And it gives you this rush of energy, and it just, there's no room for error. So you can't mess up. There's live television is just something that is exciting and scary and awesome at the same time, but you're dealing with all these logistics behind the scenes that so many people don't realize how many people it takes to pull off something like that. So I'm fortunate enough to be a part of it, minus the crazy call times and the travel that we can't control and the weather that we can't control. So
yeah. So you just reminded me of a story when you say things can go wrong. I can think back to only really one live event. I believe it was a basketball game, and I believe I was in Cedar Falls, Iowa. I can't remember who was playing besides the University of Northern Iowa, but we did not get on the air because the truck blew power, and they had to actually drive in another truck that was leaving some other event, crossing the state of Iowa, to get to Cedar Falls, that they can then use that truck to get on the air. And we were, this was a regional cable show, if I can remember correctly. That's one I can remember, and I was assigned to do official stats. So for folks that don't know, official stats means I'm sitting there with a laptop reading the game stats on a headset, telling graphics people, graphics people back in the production truck of what's happening, giving them trends, letting them know who has what points, rebounds, yada, yada, yada. And their truck is down. I'm literally sitting there watching a game, talking to no one because they don't have power in their truck. So I remember that
was
happening.
Was it a generator issue? What was the issue?
I think so, but the entire truck just had no power. They couldn't. It was, and the funny part was, it was all up until tip time, and then literally 5 minutes before the game tip, everything went down.
And this is why this is why networks are in to the arena 6 to 8 hours early to test these things. Yes. And you know what? It could be perfectly run and be fine, and then 5 minutes before it,
yes,
it hits the fan, as we like to call it. But yeah, this is not something where you can just flip a switch or reset a circuit breaker and then it'll come up in 5 minutes.
Or reboot a computer and uncheck the box for the microphone access.
It happens, things, we always prepare for something to go wrong because it always will. Yeah. I mean, I don't think I've ever been on a show where everything's been perfect. And if it happens that way, or if it starts that way, it makes everybody nervous, right? Because we're like, it's not supposed to go this smoothly. And the idea is we deal with that on the behind the scenes side, but as long as the, audience doesn't see what's happening or really knows what's happening, that's fine. And it goes for every major event. It goes for television. It goes for anything that is, happening live. We just expect and have to plan for things to go wrong. And
that's the amazing part to me, especially now. I mean, I've worked at the Valley in a year now, and I'm getting back, trying to transition back into just watching as a fan, as weird as that is. And it's still kind of weird after you worked in sports and you just sort of got conditioned to doing a job, and the job is doing this. You don't clap and you just sort of do it. And now I'm like, oh, I'm watching what I want to watch. But knowing what's happening on the other end, I've been watching, college basketball games this fall and going into the winter now. I don't know if any of these game production folks have had problems because they're on the air. I can see what I need to see. But to the, regular fan, the regular Joe sitting at home, they just want to watch their game. now they may know if the audio isn't right or something like that or whatnot, but I could notice small things like, man, they haven't put up a score bug in 3 minutes. I wonder if it went down. I could think of that.
It drives you nuts, doesn't it? I mean, I cannot watch any television the same way ever. It's ruined me forever. And it's usually really funny when my friends come over to watch, or I'm out watching games, because there's just little things, because I feel like I'm so anal retentive, which I feel like on a producer's side, it's a good thing to be that meticulous. But there's just certain things that just absolutely irks me. Yeah. Like you said, like if the bug doesn't pop up at a certain point after a huge trend, you're like, is the bug down? What's going on? My feed's working fine. There's no delay. And you want it to be as successful and fluid as possible, but that's just not reality.
For the regular fan at home is just watching the game, they may have no clue of any of that. So I literally now have an appreciation for different aspects of what makes some of these things go on. But I bring that up to transitioning to, I can remember, I don't know what it was, but I think I was watching one of those multi-team event college basketball tournaments. This is a couple years ago. And if I remember correctly, I was on Twitter and I was joking around because they had a banner in the arena.
Oh, God. I already know where this is going. I can already probably picture it.
And I'm joking of how it's like off center and one corner of it's hanging. And I'm like, boy, fix that banner. It's on camera a lot. And I'm not sure if you noticed it too or something. I can't remember clearly, but we then had a back and forth about signage in arenas and whatnot. And it's kind of like, just hang it the right way, have backup zip ties, use gaff tape. Like people know what gaff tape is, right? I just remember having that interaction with you on Twitter, and we were literally like at the same time watching the exact same thing happen. I don't know. I see those little intricacy things that nobody else probably would care about, but now I pay attention to. Go figure.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and there's people will post that all the time, and I'll just be like, it's off. It's not centered. It does it. I mean, that stuff is, I feel like, the easiest, because that's, your insight into marketing and advertising for whatever network you're broadcasting on. So I feel like perfection is as best you can is required. And I just like, come on, guys, this is not this is not hard. And gaff tape is my absolute best friend. I use it for everything. And for those that don't know what gaff tape is, it's essentially it's very similar to duct tape, but it doesn't have a weird sticky residue, and it's used on the production side to keep things secure. And
let's be honest, to keep everything secure.
Secure.
I've taped cables, signage.
Yes.
Gosh,
however, you don't want to. It just depends on the cable, because it will have a residue with cables. So you want to use either cords or paper tape to secure certain things. And paper tape is like a white tape that doesn't leave a residue at all, and it will like stick to itself almost. So I carry gaff tape and paper tape and audio electrical tape too, because that is like a game changer.
Yeah.
And that's good for live wires. Like if your iPhone cord is fraying and you want to wrap it up, and it can withstand high heat and that kind of thing. So I always have that. In fact, I was talking about that with a friend and how we use gaff tape for everything, including wrapping gifts around the holidays, because it's beautiful. It's lovely. And if you use black gaff, then all you need is like a silver Sharpie, and that will work very effectively. But
I didn't even think about that. Wow. Well, we bring all this up now because you're actually sharing your experiences and knowledges with the youth.
Yes.
How this is year 2, 3?
This is the second spring. So now I've been an adjunct professor for a full year, which is wild to think about. Okay,
so you're teaching at Alabama?
Yes.
And what's the class that you're teaching?
So I am teaching a sports and entertainment marketing and promotions class at the University of Alabama. And I am teaching it at the PR major. And it's basically students that want to work in sports or entertainment or music in some facet. And in the PR major, they're taught about journalism and how to write and deal with press releases, but they really don't get a great sense of understanding about sports itself and the marketing world and branding and sales, so that this class kind of gives them a broad understanding of all of those components together. And that's kind of what they brought me in, because I'm in the business now and fairly relevant in what is happening with trends and everything. They felt that I was a good representation of being able to explain that better to the youths, if you will. But there's definitely a lot of patience involved that I've learned, more so than even dealing with work stuff. So, but it's been a really, really rewarding class. I had never thought about teaching before, but yeah, it's been cool. It's been cool.
So I'm curious, because I look back now, I'm like, man, I would love to go take a, graphic design, digital media, social media class. It's like, I've worked in it. I've done it. I'm still doing marketing and stuff for my school district. And, I'd have an upper hand, because I'm like, but I just want to know the more inner workings and more detail. But I'm like, I actually know everything I know. It's like, I just want to show off in front of some people that don't know. I don't know. What is the feedback you're getting from students as they're taking this class? Like, what's a project? Like, what are they actually doing in this class? Are you giving them like, hey, you have to run this tournament and market it, and you need to get this sponsor? Like, what is their experience that they're getting when they are enrolled in this class?
So I have a textbook, and the textbook I think is really, really great. And it kind of gives, again, the basic understanding of what marketing basics are. I don't really get into like accounting too much or super budgets or anything like that, because I feel like that is more on a different level than
a little bit
what
more specialized.
It's a little bit more specialized than what I feel like they should know. But again, there's the brief understanding that working in sports is this glamorous, beautiful, wonderful thing. And don't get me wrong, it is.
But
however, there are so many things that a lot of people just don't realize because they've never been exposed to it before. So with this book, I have these lectures, and it's an online class. So for me, it works really well because it's really hard for me to commit to, X number of hours a day because my schedule changes so often. So the people at Alabama have really been amazing and working with me, and we kind of spent a good year working on this class and how it's built for the online structure, because it is weird to not be there in person, yet still try to give that value of understanding with real world experiences. So I'll give you an example of what my midterm paper is to kind of give you an idea. I make them do an event audit. So I feel like in school, we're basically taught certain things, and then we have to memorize them, and then we're tested on them. And yeah, that might work, but for this type of information, I feel like it doesn't really give you what you should be learning, especially in the real world. So I have them choose between a sporting event, an entertainment event, or a music event of whatever they want to do, because not everybody wants to work in sports, and I get that. This is 100% a lifestyle. It's not for everybody. Some people like the 9 to 5, and they like to shut off, on a Friday and be done with it and enjoy their weekend, and then not think about or look about anything until Monday morning. That's some people. In our business, we know differently and know that it's not even a possibility. Right. So I basically want them to take away from this class that there is a world. I kind of want to ruin the mindset of being a fan for them, if that makes sense. Yeah. Because you can be a fan to a point, but you have to think about how sports is a business, and that there's so many different elements that go into what makes a sporting event great, or any event great. So I have them choose between a sporting event, an entertainment event, or a music concert. And they have to audit the experience. And they have to, there's certain elements. So they look at parking and how easy it was to get tickets or pick up their tickets, or going through, the scanning digitally or wheel call or whatever. They deal with concessions and merchandise. And so they have all these different elements that they have to touch on. And they're looking at it from a marketing perspective now, not as a fan. So if they're going in to a baseball game on campus, it might be a lot smaller than something of like a game, an Alabama football game. It's just a whole different experience because you're dealing with a different type of target market, or you're dealing with, a smaller venue, and you're looking at it from a venue perspective. How can we make the maximum amount of money that we can? Saying, all right, parking kind of sucks in this area because, we need more lampposts at night because, there's a lot of female fans and they don't feel comfortable enough to go. So it's doing certain things like that to give a list of what can be fixed to allow a company or sponsor to sign on board to make more money for whatever brand or event you're sponsoring. So that's my midterm. And it's pretty subjective and it's a lot of opinion. But I really feel like it gives a good, well-rounded understanding of what the mindset is that it takes to work in marketing and work in sports. And the feedback that I get from students is great because everybody always tells me I can never go to an event and look at it the same way again. And I feel like that is exactly what they should be thinking. We can't go into an event thinking, oh man, I wish that this extra concession stand was open because the lines wouldn't be as long and we'd be able to enjoy the game a little longer because we're not waiting in line for the overpriced $7 soda. Or, we can try to reduce costs here, but keep costs higher over here. I mean, again, you're just looking at it from every different type of angle. And so far it's been effective. So
do you think you're, how do I put this easily? I don't want to say damaging minds, but
I'm absolutely damaging minds.
Are there people coming in thinking I want to work in sports and they realize all that goes into it and are like, yeah, maybe this isn't for me kind of thing?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And again, this is what I try to tell them because it's an online class and there's a lot of, self, time management that's involved. Yeah. That's reality. And you have to kind of look at this as like an internship. And you kind of get out of it what you want from it. And my email is always available to ask questions, even if they're like silly questions that they think, oh, she'll never answer. I try to answer everything because no question to me is silly or dumb. But people will realize that, maybe working for a professional team isn't the best in PR because you're dealing with, guys that are 22 years old and above who, let's take the NFL, for example. They have all the different abilities in the world to, get themselves home safely, and they have certain things that allow them to have ride shares, and yet they still decide to drive drunk, and then you still got to deal with it at the end of the day. So, PR is, in one word, glorified babysitting. And they think, I'll just be friends with all these players. And it doesn't work like that, And when you're dealing with professional teams, as you know, it's quite different from dealing with college teams. And you're dealing with so many different layers on the college side that you would on the professional side, that you yourself have to be on the right side of positivity as well. So they're looking at you under a really, 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 really strong microscope to say, well, who is this person that's representing this, organization? So, sometimes I have to ruin it for them to get them to understand that this is, if it's not me, it's going to be a hiring manager. And if it's not a hiring manager, it's going to be their boss or whoever that's going to out them eventually. And I'm trying to save them from that.
Yeah. It's important to have all viewpoints, see it all from all angles. Because for me, I can remember I didn't have a sports management, sports marketing background. I just sort of landed at the Valley, and I can always remember we would talk to a local college here that has a pretty strong sports business program at the college, and they would often have interns and volunteers work some of our events. And when we didn't have anything going on, like in the summer or in the early part of the fall, they'd have us come in as guest speakers. And of course, I was the one that ran social media and did website and graphic design. So I've got a pretty interesting viewpoint. And I would tell them, like, hey, what I'm doing isn't like I turn it on, do this, and turn it off and go off, and I'm good. I'm always was like paying attention to what's going on, kind of thing. Sure. And to get them understand that, it was sort of like, really. I always enjoyed the one interesting thing that they always sort of like their eyes popped out of their head was at the Missouri Valley Conference, the volleyball tournament actually happens Thanksgiving weekend, like meaning there are matches on Thanksgiving Day, Thanksgiving Friday, and then Saturday. So I'm not Black Friday shopping. I was always at a volleyball tournament, tweeting about it, taking pictures, doing interviews. They're like, really? Like, yeah. And that's just that one weekend. Like, keep in mind, sporting events happen on the weekends. They happen at nights. You're working those things. So it's a change. And to get, younger college kids to understand if that's what they want to get into, that's what the life is. And it's not always the most glamorous thing. Another example, when we did our production stuff, we would drive to basketball games and drive right back to St. Louis. So, you drive to, Cedar Falls, Iowa, 4.5, 5 hours, you're driving right back to St. Louis. Drive to Springfield, Missouri, 3 hours, drive right back to St. Louis. And guess what? Work doesn't stop. I'm back in the office the next day at 8:30 in the morning because it's a work day. We know it was a Wednesday night basketball game. Thursday work calls at 9:30 in the morning. So they all sort of went, oh, really? Well, yeah, that's just how it goes when, it doesn't stop. You might have a meeting with an ESPN person, or you might have a phone call from a company that is once website, it just didn't stop. So getting them to understand that was a thing, and that it wasn't just watching sports for the sake of watching sports. There was a lot going on behind the scenes. So that's what I always sort of grew to respect in people like yourself and other people that are doing that kind of stuff, what they do and how they do it, and sticking with it. So, I mean, I'm not in it anymore. I'm working at a school district, and I'm like going to high school sporting events, and, I'm managing sponsorships and partnerships for our school district. It's like this week I'm going to basketball games because I want to. No one's making me, but I want to go and support the kids. I want to take pictures and use them, get content for the future and things like that. So it's a different sort of thing. It's a different feel, but the professional and the college level of it is a totally different aspect. So I always hope, and I hope the kids that you're having in class, they get that part of it. And I'm sure they are with you going through it. What's some of the interesting stuff you've seen in like these projects or these reports that they're writing? Are you seeing that? Are they getting it? Are they understanding it? Or are you kind of like, that's not quite what you should be taking out of it?
Some do, and some pick it up fairly quickly. And then some need a little bit more of a push. But a lot of it, again, when you're dealing with PR, which is what the major is. So I try to stay as focused on that without going off on too many tangents. And again, this is just a generic, class of just understanding. Right. It's just at the end of the day, I want them all to have a takeaway of just, I get it. I get that it's a grind. I get that there's so many unknowns and we just have to prepare for it. That's kind of what the overall mindset should be. And it's just also positioning themselves to succeed. So if they're representing a team, like I had a student who wanted to work in the front office for the Braves, and I'm going through their social media because it's public and just going through the pictures nonchalantly. And I do this every year at the beginning of the semester. And then I come across a picture of him throwing F-bombs and a picture of Drake giving a double bird.
Oh, no.
And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I mean, hey, if they want to do that, I have no authority to tell anybody what to do, in my opinion. I am not going to penalize them and make them take it down. Again, I'm not their parent. But I did send this student a note, and I just said, hey, you don't have to take it down. It's up to you. But if I can find it, then a hiring manager can find it. Yeah. And I guarantee you, if you apply for a job with the Braves and they see that, they don't want somebody like that. Even if you believe it, even if it's a funny meme or whatever, want this person representing their organization, because all these teams, college, high school, whatever, have a reputation of being positive because they deal with so many outside extremities and negative press that they definitely don't want to deal with one more person if they can control it. So it's just kind of giving somebody a heads up that's saying, hey, this is not good. This is not great for the future of your career. And on the other hand, there's a lot of people that feel like, well, I'm just not going to be on social media at all, and then I can't get myself in trouble, which is good to a point, but you also want to help promote yourself. This is a business of, getting ahead and networking, as you've learned, as I've learned, and these are why these sports chats have been so great, right? Is there's a platform now that wasn't there when I was first applying to jobs. We didn't have LinkedIn. I'm now aging myself, but, I didn't have an opportunity to go scroll on LinkedIn to find a hiring manager to directly connect with them to say, hey, I'm interested. Give me a shot. We kind of had to do it or organically, or just hope that person would show up and we would be able to connect somehow. But with the ability to do that, now I feel like a lot of the millennials, and I was born in 83, so I'm technically an elder millennial.
That's okay. I'm older.
But, they have, I feel like they've gotten, lazy. And again, I use not everybody, but a lot of people with having to communicate appropriately and reaching out to people and asking questions, and people that don't have a digital footprint, I highly encourage them to create one, because if they want to have a job, especially in social media, and they don't have a Twitter handle, I'm going to look at that as like, well, how can I judge you outside of what your resume says? Because everybody can look great on paper. Everybody can. But I want to see how relevant you are. I want to see how you're engaging. I want to see who you're following. I want to see how you're keeping up to date on trends, because if I'm going to give you control of a social media account, I don't want you posting stupid stuff that's going to put my company or my organization in danger or have any type of threat. I want to have the confidence and trust based on what I've seen and how you interact with people, that it's going to be a good thing and it's going to be worth, updating and giving you the job. So I encourage people to kind of do what's best for them, but there's some people that need a little bit more help, and some are great. Don't get me wrong. Some are like always emailing me and always asking questions, and I can tell who's going to stand out versus the ones that aren't. And the ones that do, I really try my best to kind of place them and let them talk to people if they're really interested in this particular job, or try to get them set up where they can position themselves correctly to get that job eventually. Because, everybody wants to work for ESPN, CBS, Fox. Everybody wants to work an event like the Olympics, and it's positioning themselves depending upon what they want to ultimately do and getting them, in front of the right people to succeed. So
you mentioned it. I think that's another interesting point, because everyone thinks, I want to work in sports. I want to, work for this team, or work for this network, or work for, this entity. There are so many different aspects of working in sports. Look at me now. I'm working for a public school district and I'm handling marketing sponsorships. And it's now, granted, I don't just have it concentrated on sports. the varsity athletics, that's a big part of what I'm doing. But that's like literally like it's doing the heavy lifting of it. So like I literally create a marketing brochure about advertising with the school district, and you can have signage at our football games, and you know we're doing this. You can interact with fans and parents and staff at basketball, you know, so on and so forth. And it's just another element of it. And I think people don't understand, you know, it's, you know, not just doing, you know, I want to be the GM. I want to be communications person. I'm going to run social media. There's lots of different aspects of it. So hopefully, you know, classes like yours and other classes that are in other colleges and whatnot, that gives kids the exposure to, you know, if they do want to do something in that realm, that they can, you know, get a good broad view of it and figure out down the line if that's something that they really, really want to do. So I admire you teaching it, because it's just teaching in general is a patience, because you're, you know, doing all the work with it and planning and grading and everything. My wife's a teacher, so I can honestly give you props on that one. But also educating kids, I mean, that's just key. So especially about something that you're passionate about, I think you're gonna find the students appreciate it more when they see you're passionate about it. So hopefully you're getting that same feedback from the kids you're having in your class. So.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, like you said, it goes into a interesting mindset of, you want to work in sports, you want to work as PR for a team. Well, how about dealing with this, which is a disaster? You know, there's certain things that are just disasters that it's very difficult to rebrand or fix something when it's such a toxic environment for organizations. You know, there's been a lot of drama this year, both on and off the court, the field, whatever.
In your local area too.
In my local area, yes. There's a lot.
You got a white paper in the making in the Washington Redskins.
There's not enough hours in the day to even touch base on that. But I always ask, you know, they always say, I want to work in sports, I want to work in the entertainment business, and the first question I say is why? Yeah. And I always want to know why. And it's different for everybody. And passion is usually like the top seed, or, you know, I want to be friends with this athlete and I want to, you know, do social because it seems like so fun. And I'm like, but does it though? Let me give you an example as to what's wrong, you know, and I lead with the bad stuff because I feel like the bad stuff.
But that's important.
Is reality. I mean, there's, again, don't get me wrong, there's great stuff too. But, you know, out of the 5 amazing, unforgettable games, there have been, you know, ridiculously awful, terrible games. Yeah. And, you know, like you said, going back to holidays and nights and weekends. And I usually break it down for people in general because they ask me about my job a lot. And my job is fairly open-ended. So I usually break it down and say, okay, take away the tickets and the glamour and the glitz and the cool games you get to see, if you get to see them at all sometimes. You know, you're looking at most nights and weekends. You're looking at every major holiday. In fact, I was just tweeting about this the other day. Christmas is with the NBA. Thanksgiving has the NFL. You've got Easter, the NCAA tournament Final Four. It goes back to the same token. If you want to be a teacher and you want to work in a public school, that's fine because you can have the 3 months off. That's great. It's not a realistic thing for holidays. You enjoy spending Christmas time with your family. Well, guess what? That's bowl games and that's NBA. So you want to work, you know, for the Lakers. Well, goodbye to Christmas, you know, and it's fine. You can have your family come visit you, or you can celebrate, you know, Christmas another day, but Christmas Day itself is not going to be something where you're doing what you would normally do with a family without a job like this.
It's important for the youngins to know that going into it, so they don't get deterred and they don't feel, you know, well, this isn't what I signed up for. Well, exactly.
I want them to go in knowing that they're signing up for something that's not, I don't want to say normal, but it's not normal. I mean, for the World Series alone, we had an 18-inning game, and we still had to be on site the next day at 9:00 in the morning.
Don't get me started on baseball.
So, I mean, that's the reality. I worked at the Nationals this past year, the entire week. I was there all 7 days, and we played a total of 5.5 innings.
Wow.
And I was there every single day because our crew calls were 8 a.m, and they didn't end up, postponing the games until 4 or 5 o'clock. So I'm there. We're sitting there. We're prepared for the game to go on as normal. And then, stuff happens and they cancel the game. And that's out of our control. But we try to do as much as we can to be there. So, as long as there's an NCAA rule which states, despite the weather, especially for a basketball game, if both teams are there and the referees are on site, you play the game. Doesn't matter if fans can come out or not. Doesn't matter if there's, 2 feet of snow like I had for a GW game a couple years back. You have to be there. So figure it out. That's when you invest in a snow shovel and some hand warmers and a lot of coffee.
Oh, man. It's just all coming back. Like, I could just remember, I hope to interview some of my former coworkers at the Missouri Valley Conference because they have so many of those stories of, we've got a soccer tournament championship match and it snowed the night before, so we need to shovel the field and make a soccer field ready for a game in Omaha, Nebraska. Or I can think of several, and I will always tell people this. And when people think of the Valley, they think of Arch Madness. The basketball tournament is the bread and butter of the Valley. Yeah. But I will always tell people we spend a lot of time, I don't work there anymore, a lot of time preparing for that all year round. Sure. It's the major event for us. But in terms of working it, I will always tell people, the baseball tournament that the Valley has is one of the hardest, if not the hardest, to work because they play, and the format may have changed since I've left in the year, but 4 games in a day for 3 or 4 straight days. So you're talking a 9:00 game, a 12:30 game, a 4:00 game, and a 7:30 game, if they all stay on time and on schedule and don't go with extra innings.
Sure.
I can remember a couple years ago I believe we're in Terre Haute, Indiana State University was hosting, and we had rain and an extra inning game. We didn't leave their stadium until probably about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, and I still had to do a recap video, and I got to bed at about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, and guess what? We were back up and at it and at the stadium by 7 a.m. because we're getting ready for the next day's game.
Good times.
Not a lot of sleep to be had for the old social media director person there that I don't do anything on the field except for interview people, but that's my responsibility. And when I'm part of the team, and granted, I help with anything else. If someone needs help with awards or signage or whatever, I do whatever we have to do because we got a small staff. But that's the bed that we had to lay in, no pun intended, because there wasn't a lot of time to lay in an actual bed that week. But yeah, that was the life. So. Well, I've always.
It sounds amazing.
Yes, it is. But
and it's gonna. It makes for great stories.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We say all this. There are good times. Obviously, you grow close with people that you work with. You have great experiences. Hopefully, ultimately, you have a great path into career and end up doing something that is valuable to you, and you can do things that you want to do personally, and whatnot. So. It sounds like we're being negative and like turning people off of it, but there are a lot of positives to it. Obviously, there's a lot of perks to working in it and things like that. So,
of course, yeah. There's always. I mean, I don't think any of us would continue to put ourselves through this.
Right.
If you want to say that, if there wasn't a positive thing, and again, there's certain people that thrive off of the energy of others, which is. Personally, for me, that's why I enjoy it so much, and I like working with people that are at the same level as I am in terms of wanting to get things done and wanting to be perfectionists and wanting to put on the best possible show that they can for the audience. And when you work with people that are on your same mindset and same level, it's amazing. It's a great it's a really great thing when you're able to pull off something that seems impossible, and then yet for some reason it works. It's a great thing. Yeah. And anybody that's worked any type of event, and this is why I love it so much, because it's not just sports, right? Like, it's not just music. It's not just, I always like to say that running a sporting event is like throwing a wedding on crack, kind of.
That's a good analogy.
You're doing very similar things. You're creating catering, and you're dealing with travel, and you're dealing with budgets, and you're dealing with making sure the timing and your itinerary goes off without a hitch. And you want to give your guests the best possible show and experience and party that you could possibly give them with, a kind of okay budget without going completely bananas, right? So, look at that and how they work in TV and sports and music. It's very similar. You want to give your audience and your fans, especially from a marketing perspective, the best opportunities to enjoy themselves. So how can you work together with other people to do it? And that's the mindset.
There's one more thing I want to get into before I let you go. So I know you don't know this, but way back when I was a yee lad, probably about 8th grade, my college choices were Duke, North Carolina, and a school in the DC area known as Georgetown.
Oh boy.
Of course, back in the day, those things all have in common because college basketball, huge college basketball fan. And I used to love Georgetown. I'm trying to remember. That's going back to Alonzo Mourning and Patrick Ewing. That was a little bit before I hooked onto him. But I used to love, for some reason, watching and rooting for Georgetown. John Thompson. I mean, that was the team. And I to this day, I still don't know why. Maybe it was the logo, maybe it was the color scheme. I have no clue, but I still, to this day, have a little bit of an affinity for Georgetown. And I bring that up because, of course, you have a relative that has a unique perspective of Georgetown basketball as well. Can you fill us in on who that is and what they do?
Yeah, my father is the voice of Georgetown basketball. So he does the play-by-play for them on radio. Just hit his 1400th game last week. He's been doing it since 1974-75 season. So 45 years. It's a long time to talk. So he's seen Georgetown in their prime, and he's seen them. There's been a lot of ups and downs, like every major men's basketball tenure. But he's been there, so it's been cool to learn from him and to talk about somebody with passion. I can only hope that after 45 years of being in this business that I'm still as excited for a noon game as he is. You know what awesome. I mean, in fact, I'm working with him tomorrow. I'm working a Fox Sports game, and my crew call is 6 a.m, which is not ideal, but for a noon game, it is pretty normal. Yeah. But regardless of who the opponent is, he's excited for his job every day. He loves traveling, and he sees everything. And that's a great role model to have when you're growing up, figuring out what you want to do, and being told, yeah, this is a grind. It's not ideal. And I don't like losing at the Dome, the Carrier Dome in Syracuse. And it's not a great feeling when you're, losing a national championship to, Michael Jordan in North Carolina. But, that happens. That's life. And that's a really great lesson. I feel like sports gives us such a great understanding of the way the world works. And growing up, I had I had the greatness of Georgetown basketball growing up. So, as a fan, you want to be supportive of a team that wins and is doing well. And, I'm also a Redskins fan, so we don't have to talk about any of that. But, not as much winning as I'd like. A lot more drama than I'd like. But, you learn to understand that that's, winning and rainbows and cupcakes, as delicious as they are, is not quite reality. So
you probably crossed through everything with the Caps, the Redskins, a little bit Georgetown, Tennessee, the Nationals. Am I missing anybody there? I mean, you've had some success. You've had a lot of heartbreak.
There's a whole lot of ups and downs. In fact, they cross over very few times. There was a Georgetown Tennessee game a few years back in DC, and I think the total score was like 60 points. Oh. And the only thing, people are like, "Oh, who are you rooting against? Who are you rooting for? Who's your vested interest?" And I'm like, I don't care who wins. I just want a good game. Yeah. I just want a good game. I want it to be close. I want it to be fun. I'm going to support both teams, whatever. That's all I wanted, and that didn't even happen. Come on, give me something. And it was, yeah. I still have friends that went to Maryland that still give me a lot of crap for the Peach Bowl in 2003 when Tennessee got their tushies handed to them in college football. The score was, I think, 33-3. And I still have friends giving me stuff for that. So there's always
bragging. The stuff doesn't go away.
No, it doesn't go away, but it's all in good fun. And then when they come back to beat them, then I give it. There's a give and take. And it's good, harmless fun, but I wouldn't have it any other way.
I feel like I would have to ask your dad this question, but I'm going to ask you, and maybe you can give if you know his perspective, but your perspective I'd like to know too. Old Big East versus new Big East.
There's not really a contest there. Yeah. I miss the old Big East. I miss the inverted rivalries just because those were just so raw. And it's just, I feel like these days it's not what it used to be. And because honestly, there was really nothing else back then to distract us. So that is probably a big component of all the rearranging of all these conferences now.
The landscape is different.
Oh yeah, it's a lot different. And a lot of it has to do with exposure, TV rights. That is a really big reason why, the Big East.
Right. The currency is what it is. Yeah, exactly.
And that has a lot to do with it. And, I work with the television networks too. So, I mean, looking at that, I'd be like, yeah, I get why there's a need for change. But at the same time, the business has changed. Now we have this whole digital component that was never there before. So what else did you have to do but go to basketball games? You didn't have the ability to necessarily watch them on TV because they might have not have been on television. So, if you're not in the local DC market, you're listening to my dad on the radio. But if you don't, there was no internet radio back then. So you're not listening to, Sirius XM back in the 80s. You're hopefully listening to, an AM broadcast of my dad. And, that's your connection. Right, so it's changed quite a bit. I do miss the old Big East just because the rivalries were just so fun. And I'm glad they've added a back and forth with Georgetown, Syracuse, because games like that should stay, whether they're in the same conference or not. It's still going to be a storied rivalry. Same with Maryland and Duke, or North Carolina and Duke. Those types of teams, interstate rivalries like the Tennessee Vanderbilt, that kind of thing is always going to be something big because it's the bragging rights. It's that, you have a full year to say, oh, well, we beat you. And, it's good, clean fun, as I like to say, paint your face and talk smack and what have you. So, I miss the old Big East, and I feel like my dad probably does too. Yeah. But still some great teams out there. There's still plenty of talent, and the talent's gotten even better, and they've gotten even younger. So, college basketball is always exciting for me and for everybody that I talk to. My dad obviously loves it. So
that's my number one seed of favorite sports. I can any two top 25, top 50 teams, I can pretty much sit there and take them in.
It's so unpredictable, right? I mean, look at the NCAA tournament as an example alone. You could be the best team all season, and with a one and done tournament like the NCAA's, that can end, and you could have one terrible game, or a team like Florida Gulf Coast University, who we won't talk about any further past this point, but they can be on fire one night and, hit 16 threes in a row, and that can cost you your entire season. So it's exciting. It's miserable. It's the agony of defeat. It's everything rolled into one, and it's amazing.
Anything big on the horizon in 2019 for you?
I've got Super Bowl coming up. I've got Final Four coming up. There's a lot of things in between. I feel like it doesn't end. And there's always opportunities behind those doors that sometimes might not be open, and sometimes you just got to kick them open to find out what they are. So looking forward to seeing what's coming up.
Thanks to Pam for taking time to join me here on the podcast. We followed each other on Twitter for a number of years, going all the way back to our participation in the sports PR conversations with a number of similar interests in PR, marketing, and production. I hope you enjoyed listening to our conversation, and I would certainly welcome any feedback, questions, or comments. Feel free to shoot me a tweet at @TheDocket, and you are always welcome to leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts and iTunes. Thank you for listening to Persons of Interest.